Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're going to be looking at the Indianapolis Colts 2017 Team Review Analytics. And this video is mainly going to deal with looking at all the areas that the Colts performed in terms of team statistics, and with an emphasis on how to get better. So this definitely is going to be a video where I'm going to be going over all the areas where the Colts were not that great. And you might go, this is just a hate piece or whatever. But ultimately, this is just to give you an idea of this is how you performed, and this is where you need to perform in the future in order to get better. So it's just going to give you some ideas about the areas in which you actually do have needs. So like I do like the sort of concept of like team needs and stuff like that, but I do think that it kind of gets overblown a bit where people don't really put a methodology or any kind of context to what the team needs actually are. But ultimately, this is just going to give you an idea of this is where you performed. This is where winning teams typically perform. And then ultimately, that will give you an idea of all the areas where they need to improve upon for next season if they want to actually win more football games or, et cetera. So ultimately, that's what we're going to do today. All terms and definitions are going to be in the description. So if you're new to the channel, if you're new to the work that I do, all that stuff will be in the description. So let's start with the Colts. So ultimately, we're going to look at the 2017 season data review. Again, information here. And when you look at the Colts, it's pretty clear that whether you're talking offense or defense, not where they needed to be. The one area I will say is on offense. Their turnover percentage was not that bad. It was a 94.02 out of 100. So the offense didn't really turn the football over a lot. That wasn't really the issue. But the real issues on offense was the sack percentage was very, very, very high. So 3.31 out of 100 was their sack percentage, sort of offensive score. And again, the higher the number is, the better you are at preventing sacks versus the lower, the more sacks you allow. And that's a big issue for the Colts, ultimately this year, was they allowed a lot of sacks. Their offensive score percentage was also not that great, below average with the 34.49 out of 100. So they weren't really amazing when it comes to putting points on every single offensive drive either. And defensively speaking, below average defensive offensive score percentage, below average turnover percentage, below average sack percentage, below average interception percentage. So they were not where they needed to be in terms of preventing points, in terms of creating turnovers, sacks, or interceptions. Then when you get into not interceptions, but when you get into special teams data, they were below average in terms of punt return yardage and kick return yardage. So not that great in terms of offensive punt returns or offensive kick returns, but they were very good in terms of defensive punt return yardage and defensive kick return yardage. So they were a lot better at preventing punts and preventing kicks than they were actually getting a lot of yardage from punts and kicks on average. Their field goal percentage was 64.88 out of 100, so not the worst field goal percentage ever. Extra point percentage, though, could use some improvement. And punting average was 62.68 out of 100, which is not that amazing either from that perspective. So, but ultimately, again, when you look at the overall data and stuff like that, the offense was not where it needed to be in terms of putting points on the board and sacks. The defense was also not where it needed to be in terms of preventing points, getting sacks, getting turnovers, etc. And the special teams was okay, but they could use some improvements in terms of punt return yardage and kick return yardage and extra point percentage, stuff like that. So ultimately, not a very good football team, obviously, on paper, but there were some positives about their team. So there was some hope or silver linings or, certain areas to kind of look at and kind of ponder and stuff like that. Now, when you look at how this Colts team compares to every Colts team since 1998, obviously they regressed from last year. The offensive score percentage took a nosedive. The turnover ratio did get better, though. The sack percentage got worse, so they allowed a lot more sacks this year versus last year. The defense actually got a little bit better in terms of defensive offensive score percentage. 7.72 versus 3.62. So the defense did get a little bit better. They were able to create turnovers a little bit more. Interception percentage was also a little bit higher, but they did get worse in terms of creating sacks. In terms of special teams, pretty much got worse in each category. but did get better in terms of defensive punt return yardage and defensive kick return yardage. Field goal percentage went down a little bit. Extra point percentage went down a decent amount, and punting average kind of went down from. They were one of the better teams in terms of punting average, and then they became a little bit more average to a little slightly above average in terms of that particular area, and ultimately scored 11.34 out of 100. Now, where this team ranks, this was the second worst team since 1998. So that just kind of gives you a perspective of how bad this team was statistically since that time period. So not the best year, obviously, kind of one of the worst in a while. Based on the overall statistics, but this kind of just gives you a perspective on the historical perspective. But ultimately, let's get into the areas where you can improve. Because instead of just dwelling on how bad you are, let's get into, okay, how can you get better? And when you look at this particular chart, this gives you an idea of the average score based on all those statistics I just mentioned for teams that win 12 to 16 wins, 9 to 11 wins, 8 wins or more, or 7 wins or less. And when you look at this data, when you look at these statistics, the big areas where they need to improve, of course, is offense and defense. The sack percentage was a 3.31 out of 100. That needs to get into the 60s and 70 range. So offensive linemen to prevent sacks is a big deal. Like that's a big thing they need to really think about improving, because they were one of the worst teams in the NFL this year in terms of preventing sacks. Offensive score percentage definitely needs to go up. Because 34.49 is not cutting it. They need to get into the 60s, 70s to 80 range if they actually want to up that as well. Defensive offensive score percentage should get into the 60s, 70s if they want to be more consistently, winning football games as well. Turnover ratio on defense needs to go up. Sack percentage needs to go up in terms of the ability to create sacks. Interceptions, definitely. Punting average and kick return yardage. I definitely think they should put a little bit more focus on getting a better punt returner, getting a better kick returner, or putting more emphasis into those areas, because they were, it's punting and kicking is not the most impactful thing ever, but you do at least want to be a little bit above average in terms of, that particular metric to win more football games. Their defensive punt return yardage and defensive kick return yardage, of course, was exactly where it needs to be. Their field goal percentage was not amazing, but it definitely was within the average of most of those high winning teams. Punting average was definitely where it needs to be, and then, of course, overall score was definitely not where it needs to be. So, in terms of their overall data score was not in the 80s or the 70 range where it needs to be in order to win 8 wins, 9 to 11 wins, or 12 to 16 wins. So ultimately, this is all the areas where you need to improve. A lot of areas, but this just gives you some perspective in terms of this is how your team performed, and this is where they need to be, or at least this is where they should be, based on how teams in the past have performed based on these data points. And then the last part, at least the last chart we're going to bring out here, is a chart that is the other sort of data points. So these are data points that I don't typically talk about that much in the season, things like strength of schedule and those other sort of things, just because it's really hard to keep track of it during the season, and it's a lot of extra work for a little bit of, it's definitely good information, don't get me wrong, but I do think it's a little bit better to just break that stuff out at the end of the season like we're doing right now. But you can also pause the video right now and kind of look at all these data points and go from there. But big things I just wanted to focus in on is how things kind of went from 2016 to 2017. Of course, the completion percentage dropped off pretty significantly on first down, second down, and third down. So that was definitely a big contributor, I think, in terms of the offensive woes. The running game got worse in terms of first down conversion rate and second down conversion rate. Third down actually stayed constant. So it pretty much the ability to convert on third down definitely kind of stayed the same, but first down and second down did not stay where it needs to be. And of course, first down conversion rate with the pass on first down, second down, and third down, significantly below average compared to what it was in 2016. And I understand what you're going to say, but Andrew Luck. And yeah, I get that. But I'm just telling you, this is how you performed in 2017. This is how you performed in 2016, just to give you some perspective on what happened, like what was a driving cause of this sort of stuff. So even if you think that Andrew Luck comes back and everything gets better, which it probably will get better, you still have to think about the running game also needs some improvement and some other sort of areas here as well. So this just gives you some perspective on stuff like that. Ultimately, what should you target in free agency in the draft? Well, first off, offensively speaking, I think you need more skill players. You need more running backs. You need wide receivers. You need tight ends. You can never have enough of those guys, but especially on a team that has such a low offensive score percentage, that's a big deal to consider. Offensive linemen, sack percentage, way, way too high. You allowed way too many sacks this year on offense. So you have to get better in terms of the offensive line. You have to be able to not allow as many sacks as you did this year, period. Defensively speaking, I don't even know where to begin because you were not very good in terms of preventing points. You were not very good in terms of turnovers, sacks, interceptions. So everything on defense needs to be addressed. And on special teams, I would definitely consider getting a guy to help in terms of punt return yardage, kick return yardage, and those other sort of areas. So getting a guy that can do punt returns, kick returns, and help bump that up a bit, I would definitely suggest that. Field goal percentage was not amazing, but it was prerequisite, I guess. And of course, punting average was also prerequisite. So I think if you kind of stay there in that area, I think you'll be fine. But ultimately, those are all the areas where I think you really need to focus in on when it comes to free agency and the draft. And I think if you can improve those areas, I think you'll see a lot of improvements. Because even when Andrew Luck was there, the defense was not that great. The offense, as you should have learned from this year, can't really stand on its own without Andrew Luck, and ultimately you just have to take your lumps and move on. So those are all the areas that again I would consider kind of getting into and thinking about and stuff like that. And of course, my name is James Coburn. You can find my other work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know. Hit that notification button so that you're always reminded when another video of mine drops. And I will talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.